Alright guys, we're going to get started on the Regear of our Dana 44. This is on the front of the 2005 Rubicon. What I'm going to do is pan around this way. I'm lucky enough that on the Rubicon, so I point my finger here, we've actually got a drain plug built into the factory diff. So I'm going to get that pulled out and allow us to get drained here, and that'll be kind of step one. And as you can see, we've got nice clean diff fluid. This was actually just changed probably less than 5,000 miles ago when I did the front axle shafts U-joints and went ahead and put new seals in that front axle as well. Alright, so we're going to be pulling the front diff cover now. One thing that's going to be easier is dropping this tie rod, especially as we're pulling the pulling that carrier in and out a couple times, setting backlash and preload. So that's one thing I found was always easier, is pull that tie rod off. Again, we've got one extra bolt. It's not going to take too much time. In our case, we're actually going to be swapping steering, so this is going to be needed anyway, so we're going to get a jump on that. Now as you pull this, do not hammer here. What I've found is hammer right over here. And that'll loosen it up and you can get her dropped out of the way. Alright, so what you'll notice is I left one that's kind of off-centered still in the diff cover, and the reason I did that is as I get this, now I've got my diff cover can now hang. For those of you without a drain port, that this is the first time that this is when you're going to be pulling your fluid out, found this one bolt makes life a heck of a lot easier to let all your fluid drain, get everything dripping there while it's not spilling all over the floor, or you're not dropping a diff cover and covering yourself in differential oil. And now we're gonna pull this diff cover out. This is also, usually when I change differential fluid, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna pull the cover off even if I have that drain, just so I can inspect gears. Really the only additional work or cost you have is gonna be the couple bucks you're going to spend on a little bit of RTV, but it's definitely well worth it. Again, go ahead and pull your diff cover if you're going to change your fluid. Everything looks in great shape. When you're checking, you want to check, make sure you've got no chips as far as inside of any of your ring gears. If you've got an open carrier, you'll see spider gears there. You're going to check for those. On this with the air locker, we're just looking at air hose here, make sure we see no dry rot, anything like that. Brake clean is going to help clean everything up inside. This is a Sure Shot canister that I have. It works great on just kind of getting brake clean throughout everything. I can order all of this brake clean by the gallon versus spending $5 on a can, and really allows me to get a lot more use, a lot more cost effective. Now you can see I can wipe my hand there and got no oil, which is great. That's what you're looking for. More oil means more mess. There's one thing that I've learned to do over the years is whether you've got a parts washer that is similar like this, or if you're working with an old school parts washer like I have here, one of the easiest things to keep track of all your bolts, especially as you're just putting some degreaser on, I've got stuff like the drain plugs and bolts here, is take a spray paint cap. This I'm just writing rear diff. And now I can go ahead and just fill this up with some of my parts washer solution. And I'll just let that sit in there and kind of work itself as we're doing other projects. I've already got my diff cover in here. We've got the rear one cleaned up pretty well. Gonna let that just sit here, kind of dry out, and then move on to another project. All right, continue with disassembly of the front axle. First thing we're gonna do is pull off our caliper here. You've got 2 bolts in the back on your TJs. The whole caliper will come off, and for that I've got a nice little bracket just to keep it hanging. Pull our rotor. And we got a cotter pin for the hub. Alright guys, we're going to continue with removal of the Dana 44 front axle. I'm going to remove the entire axle housing. One, it's going to just make life while we're regearing a little bit easier, but I'm already going to be doing that minus the springs and shocks was the plan since we're replacing control arms. So we'll go ahead, we're going to pull springs and shocks. We're going to get control arms disconnected, pull the whole axle housing off. That way we'll have the ability to go ahead and re-gear it while it's out, give the whole axle a fresh coat of paint. Alright guys, last night we got the axle pulled out of the Jeep, started actually re-gearing, realized that my camera battery had died and I did not have any spares. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. What I've done is gone ahead and pulled the carrier out, pulled the ring gear off, pulled the old pinion out. We've got the new ring gear already installed, new pinion in there, new bearings on the carrier. I've got the inner bearing on the pinion already on there, setup bearing on the outside. And what I'm doing now is just checking as far as with marking compound or gear pattern. Right now I'm showing that I've got a little bit, the pinion's a little bit too shallow. I've got to get it a little bit deeper in there. So I'm going to show you disassembly in a nutshell as far as how to pull apart your front axle, even though we've already done it. But this is going to be needed to reset our pinion depth. So what we're going to do is carrier bearing caps, get those pulled. I'll show you what I do as well. As you can see my Sharpie marks, they are stamped with E, but to make it easier is I put 2 horizontal lines and 1 vertical line. That way I never mix up. I also put them on the top. That way I'm not going to go and accidentally flip these upside down. That way you know everything fits the same way it came out. I also set up my little bench over here to the side, and I kind of lay everything out in the order that it comes. On your Rubicon with the locker that's in there, makes it a pain to get this cap off. So what I do is pull it all together. One thing you want to watch is on the Rubicon we've got shims on the outside. Again, I'm going to place those in the corresponding spots here with it. What I'll do is I'll pull the camera over this way and kind of show you on that ring gear. This is the pattern that I was getting, so you can see we're right at the top. not quite where I want it to be, so we're gonna get that pinion a little deeper in there, and we'll get the pinion pulled out now. And we've got our pinion gear out now. One thing I'm going to show you is I set up a bearing race, set up bearings. So I've got the inside kind of ground down. That way we get a nice, easy, smooth finish on there. Makes it a lot easier for pulling these in and out for setting pinion depth. On this particular axle, we're going to set the pinion depth with a shim behind the race of the inner bearing. Alright, so what we've done is we've added a little bit more thickness to that shim. I've gone up in size. And if I can get my setup race correct. Got that in. Slide our pinion gear in. One thing I'll point out is since this is a factory Rubicon, they do have the locker, I guess, indicator switch there. You need to make sure that is in the out position. So right now I've just got that held with a little piece of actually a cut off cotter pin. But when you do your install, you need to make sure that that is out. I don't recommend the cotter pin. Usually like a little piece of wood, like a popsicle stick is what I generally use. So we're setting all the shims in. All right, so as we check backlash, right now we're at 0, that is about 6, so we're right on that borderline of acceptable backlash. They say 6 to 10. We're gonna check our ring gear pattern. And what I like to do is as it's getting ready to hit that marking compound is add some extra force in there. That way you're getting a better reading. That pattern actually looks a lot better. So I think we are gonna get her set up as far as bearings now. All right guys, we ended up setting the backlash a little bit looser, got it to 8 thousandths now. New pattern looks a lot better. A lot happier with that. It's centered up on the gear a lot better. So we'll get disassembled one more time and from there reassemble with the final bearings and races for the pinion. All right, setting pinion bearing preload. Right now we're a little loose. We're getting like 5 inch-pounds. So we're gonna go ahead and take out a shim, or at least subtract a little bit off of a shim. See where that gets us. What I do is I throw that nut back on, just because that nut's going to help catch that pinion if for any reason I drop it. And you can see that nut is holding it just so we don't drop our pinion by accident. And so these are the shims we've got. What I'm going to do is probably pull that, which was a just 1/1000. Start with that and see where we go. Notice I have not put my seal in yet. this was a crush sleeve and we were setting pinion depth, we would need to do that first. Or not depth, but bearing preload. I think we're going to be too tight there. Yep, right now we are, you want to do the rotational mass, we're about 20. We're going to go ahead and swap in one more shim, just go to a little smaller this time.